the easiest way to kill something that you love is by being greedy. Like I've said, you love that thing, be smart about how to grow it. Recognize what you can and you cannot do. Get the people that can do what you cannot do, and try to make the best of it.
Today, we're talking about NFTs. I know, just bear with me for a moment. It's not what you think. My guest today is Oscar Mar, a designer and animator who's also a co-founder of Parallel, a company that's building an online sci-fi competitive deck building card game with some gorgeous artwork. The cards themselves can be purchased as NFTs, and this made me wonder, is this yet another example of a company built during the NFT hype phase that's now limping along and hoping for a miracle? And the answer is no. This is a very different thing, and an example of the type of businesses that artists can build to develop their own IP into products that people actually want to use. Oscar is incredibly open about how the company launched, where in the process luck played a factor, and how they make money to keep the lights on. So if you're curious about the aftermath of the NFT bubble popping, you'll find this conversation fascinating. So let's dive in. Oscar, I have a question for you, dude. So on your website, I went to your website, which Oscar Mar Studio, a lot of really cool stuff on there. And then I went to your About page and you had a quote on there, and I want to read it and then I'd like you to comment. So this is the quote. In early 2021, I co-founded Parallel, a sci-fi IP branching into different entertainment mediums, including a card game that's currently in open beta, a comic book series, short films. In order to properly develop Parallel, I've taken the bittersweet decision to forego client work for the foreseeable future. You achieved escape velocity. I know a lot of people would love to be in that position. So my first question is, what do you currently do?
I am the art director at Parallel, so I make sure, the images stay consistent. We follow the lore to a T. We try to get things aligned visually and manage a lot of people, which is, it's not the most fun, but, part of the game.
Yeah, so we'll go deep into Parallel in a little bit, but I want to ask you real quick, just what is the makeup of the Parallel team? Like, how many people are there? What kinds of roles are there? Is it all designers? Is it a bunch of coders? How's it set up?
No, there's definitely a lot of areas in the studio. We have from accounting to creative to game design to programming. We have contractors to the audio department. So it's definitely a bunch of disciplines that are involved in the studio. And when it comes to the art side of things, we have around 10 very talented artists. We can go into why these people are there. Yeah, we can talk about why I approach them too, if you want later.
Gotcha. So okay, that's interesting. I mean, it's a full business. I think, in an email you mentioned that there's about 50 people there.
In between contractors, full-time people. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. And so your role, are you actually designing and animating still, or are you mostly managing at this point?
I'm mostly managing and filling calendars, but also I like a few pieces. I'm selfish and I keep those to myself. Like the few, if there's an animatic, I want my hands on that. Or if there's like a pack opening, I want to, make sure that I can design the experience. So when I can, I still get my hands in there. But for the cards, I don't really work on them anymore. The artists that do are way better at making them that I would be.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. And so you've called Parallel a studio a couple of times. So do you think of it as a studio? Like, to me, it seems like it's a game company that has artists making artwork for the game, right? That's one way of looking at it. But you've used the word studio. So does it run like a studio?
Yeah, I guess it's a combination. When we started it, I wanted to run it the way I've worked on big studios before, full time for years, and there were things that I thought were not that could be done differently. So that's when we started. That was the deal from my side, right? Mm-hmm. Like, okay, let's try and run this with my dream scenario. Let's see what works. Let's see what doesn't. Maybe these things have to be done a certain way for a certain reason. I don't know. I've never managed a studio. Let's see. But it is, in my mind, it is a studio because we have, we have the TCG, the trading card game. Well, we are also dabbling in different areas. We are starting to make physical toys. We've announced a project called Colony. It's related to AI, not AI art. It's more the actual AI thinking of how the characters think. So yeah, that's why I call it a studio. There's a lot of things moving.
Very cool. All right. Well, let's go back in time a little bit, and I want to hear about your history and sort of how you ended up here. So in the pre-interview, I always love to ask, like, what are mistakes you've made? Because I think you get good stories out of that, right? And you said that when you were working on your first game, which was for Electronic Arts called Skate, I think, you said you accidentally deleted all of the streets in the game by mistake because you were too shy to ask questions. I'd love to hear that story. What happened? What did you learn from that?
Well, I learned to ask questions, obviously. What happened was we were using this like internal software where every person who's working on the environment or on the level, you do your work. I was doing lighting. I set my lights. Everything was looking good. And then you submit it. But it's designed like that. It didn't have the best. No, I'm not gonna say that because it sounds like I'm gonna blame the UX designer. I just didn't know how to use it properly, and I didn't want to look like an idiot. So I didn't want to ask someone, and I was like, "Yeah, well, they showed me once. I should know how to do this." It was late. There was no one in the studio, and when I submitted my stuff, I was like, "Okay, I'm done for the day. I'll come back tomorrow." I show up in the morning and the engineers are like running like crazy, saying that all the roads of the game, which it's a skateboarding game, they're kind of important, are gone. And I was like, I was like, okay, they'll figure it out. Like, I don't know, someone did something. And then I started to get called like, hey, your submission, like Oscar Mar's submission is what deleted everything. And I was like,
oh man.
Oops. One of the programmers was really, really angry. He was like good cop, bad cop. The other guy was like, more calm. And I just asked them, look, how big of a did I ruin the project? And the other guy was like, not really. We just have to revert the changes and it's fixed. So I was like, okay, well then, all right, I made a mistake, but also take it easy, So that's where I started to see how important it was to communicate to someone well, I was under them. So yeah, I saw the difference. Like, okay, I like this guy, not so much. So yeah, it was fixed and that was that.
So have you always been, because Parallel is a game, right? Like that's kind of one of the primary products is this sort of, it's like a card game, but online. Is that always something that you've been interested in working on? Like, it sounds like you have, experience doing that for a while.
It is my first card game. This is, when we started, I told my partners, I've never played a card game. So I had to, learn about them and see. I mean, obviously I knew from pop culture about Magic and all the classic games. So I'm like, yeah, I know they exist, but I never actually went deep into them. So yeah, when we started, I was like, okay, let me see how these things work. And then I started to see why the artwork has to be a certain way. A lot of UX, UI, but it's on paper. In the traditional cards, you're like, okay, how can you translate that to a digital form? So yeah, I thought I was out of games, to be honest, because I started to work on movies when I was freelancing. So I was like, okay, maybe that's that for games. Turns out, it seems like I'm deep in games for a while.
Yeah. That's fate. Just sucked you back in. So you also said that you've learned a lot of lessons by doing things the wrong way. And I thought that was an interesting way to put it. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, this happened also when I started. I was 21 working at EA Steel. And I thought I was being really clever by leaving my computer unlocked with Photoshop open and showing pieces that I did on my personal time. I thought I was showing I have this skill set and look what else I can do. yeah, so I thought it was like, yeah, it's an opportunity to show my portfolio, and people can like maybe tell me, oh, you want to do the cover, you want to work on this and that.
Right.
So I did that for about a couple of weeks, and a producer called me and he told me, hey man, what's up with why is Batman on your computer at night? I was like, oh yeah, did you like the style it's painted on? And he's like, I like it, but people are quite like, is that freelance? Is it like, what are you doing? People are starting to say, hey, on what is Oscar working on? So, I had to go around, tell producers my train of thought, and they were like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. Like, put that on your website, work on what, like, they knew I was not working on that there, but
Yeah.
I was just putting there the work that I had done in my personal time, and they told me, yeah, please don't do that. It's hard to explain to a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, lesson learned. I thought I was being clever.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I mean, like, that probably made people around you think, oh, maybe Oscar's not like a super team player. Maybe he's in it for himself. He's trying to stand out or something rather than do his part. And I'm wondering, like, has any of those lessons, has it helped you now? Because you're now managing other artists, right? Do you find yourself seeing them making some of the same mistakes you made, but now you're on the other side of it?
Well, I mean, the artists on the team are also very experienced, so that, like, that just doesn't happen anymore. But it did help in other studios. When if I saw someone else doing something similar, I will explain to them, hey, I would recommend not to, like, if you want to show certain skill set, do it in our project. Like, if we're working on Far Cry, do it for Far Cry, and let's see where it goes. Like, if you want a graphic style for it, try it and see if it can be used in posters in the game or the cover of the game. Just stick to the IP that you're working on, and of course, in your free time, do whatever you want to do.
Gotcha. Yeah. It's a good lesson, when you become a professional artist and the thing you love doing now becomes your job. Sometimes it gets a little messy, like having that boundary between your personal stuff and what you're being paid to do, which is not up to you. It's up
exactly.
to whoever's writing the checks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you also mentioned that another lesson came from trusting a big studio that you shouldn't have. And, you don't have to like put anyone on blast or anything, but I'm just curious, like, what did you mean by that?
So at that time, I had a working visa. I'm originally from Mexico, so I was in Canada with a visa, right? And the studio that I was at, you could start to see weird things starting to happen, which, is normal and fair. If business is going through something, they have to do, unfortunately, whatever is necessary to, make the best for the people that's in the business. So I just asked one of the people that were on a position that they could tell me if, I should worry or not. I didn't ask specifically like, hey, am I gonna be let go? I just asked, hey, is everything okay? And she was like, oh yeah, don't worry. And then the next day on the elevator, I didn't say anything, and someone told me, hey, we wanted to know you're good. Like, you Oscar, you're good. And I was like, okay. And I in my mind, I just told her, look, if something's happening, like, I just need to know because I'm on a visa.
Yeah.
I need to figure some things out that others don't have to figure out here. So they told me, hey, just so you know, you're good, without me asking. I kept giving my 110%. And one Friday, not long after that, a bunch of us get an email saying, if you have this email in your inbox, go to this meeting room. And there's this guy next to a lawyer that we've never seen in our lives telling us, hey, you guys have to go. Again, that's not the part I'm bitter about. I understand that. What sucks is that they really made me feel you're good. And after that, the visa, it's not, you have a certain amount of weeks to get your stuff in order. If not, you have to leave the country. So I just had to run for weeks trying to find another job, figure all this out. Then that other studio has to get my like a different visa for me. So that's that. I'm like, okay, I need to. I put a lot of trust where I should, and that always stayed with me.
Interesting. So then were you so have you ever freelanced or have you always been sort of full-time with a company?
Yeah, I started freelancing in 2017 after reading the freelance manifesto. That was a
Oh, I've
huge
heard of it. That's good.
help. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That helped a lot. After that, I remained freelancing until 2021. Yeah,
Oh, that's really cool. Okay. And so what seemed to work best for you in terms of getting freelance work?
emailing studios without expecting just to email them and say, hey, I'm available. Here's my work. I hope we can work together someday if it fits what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That always that just seemed to work. They're like,
Yeah.
hey, actually, we're just starting this project with cell animated style, and then we have this like for a real 3D project. We say you can do that too. Yeah, like UI. We have a lot, all the movies. Even if it's not an Avengers movie,
Yeah.
now every movie if there's a submarine, there's like a UI screen
Yeah.
that's needed. So yeah, just emailing people, and once you get to know to work with a solid group of studios and you work well with them, the calls just keep calling back. Fortunately,
Yeah, that's awesome. I know sometimes it is just that simple. Just like let people know. I recently interviewed Chris Doe, and I asked him like, "Hey, if you were starting over as a freelancer, what would you do?" And the first thing he said was like, "Make it easy to find you, and make it easy to know, like for people to know what it is you do." And it's funny how often those basics get missed. How often does Parallel hire freelancers?
it's been like for the visual side of things, it's been almost year and a half, 2 years since we hired the last artist. But if we need packaging design, for example, we go to someone that specializes in that. We're working with Brent Ash. He's a great packaging designer. So yeah, we reach out to people depending on the needs for like small projects like that. But for full time, it's been about a year and a half since the last time we approached someone.
Gotcha. And were those artists, they were they people you already knew, or did you have to like go out and recruit people, or how'd that work?
Some of them I already knew. Some of them I knew their work, and the way like my first email to them was, "I'm a fan of your work," and that's true. I honestly looked for people whose work I am a fan of, and whose personal work matched the style that we had going at Parallel. Because what I've seen a lot happening in other, these big studios is the art director reaches out to this artist with a fantastic style, very unique, brings him or her to the project, and then they're like, okay, now do this in this style. And it's like, well, you're not really making good use of the talent of this. Like, if you're gonna bring someone like that, bring that person to infuse that flavor to the project, right? And make it like add that difference that no one else can add. So that's what I was looking on these guys. I was like, okay, let's I see your personal style matches what we're doing. I don't want you to force a different style. So I want you to help me actually art direct this thing. That's why they were approached. And a lot of very talented artists reached out. And unfortunately their style was so unique that it will change the our style. But it's not because I don't like it. I love what you do. It's just it's too unique and too strong that it
Right.
will not fit. So yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, so let's start talking about Parallel. And why don't we just start? What is it? What is Parallel? How did it get started? How'd you get involved?
So what is Parallel? Parallel is as a studio, what we talked about is like this place trying to work on cool things, PCGs, cinematics, physicals, this trying to bring the IP to different game mediums and see what works and what doesn't. And how it started, I was approached by a friend. He told me, "Hey, I have this idea for a game. What if we start to like create these images and we start playing with the lore and balancing a game? I had been approached for projects, not specifically like that, but you know, a friend approaches it and he's like, "Hey, I have this idea. Let's do this, and it will be huge." And then you do it, nothing happens. So this time I was like, "Yeah, sure." Like I can work at nights. I like doing stuff. I like doing illustration. So I was like, "Yeah, okay, sure." We started to just make cards, come up with with the lore and like what characters will be and what each faction will stand for, and then more a few other people joined us to actually start designing a game. Yeah, at some point we had a bunch of images, and I was like, "Hey, the only way of saying if this is gonna work is if we put them out there and see what happens." And we put them out there as a collection, where we were very open in the fact that we're trying this thing. If the collection gets sold, that will be what can like allow us to start working on this.
Right. So these were
full-time.
NFTs that you were selling.
Yeah,
Okay.
they were sold as NFTs.
Yep.
And if we don't reach that number, then we tried and we move on to whatever we were doing before, and we thank you all for trying, and that's the reality. Turns out people liked them. We sold the collection, and that allowed us to be like, hey, okay, now I can start, putting freelance work on a site for a few months and get these two artists. At the time, they were Nacho Yagüe and Cafaro. One is very good at designing vehicles. One is very good at designing characters. And that way we could actually start to paint this world. And then, yeah, we just kept putting cards out, putting the base set together, and people kept buying the cards. Then we had our like playable version of the game using those cards, and that's when people saw like, okay, this is a reality.
So how long was it between launching that first that first set of NFTs and actually having a game that you can play with them?
Probably 4 or 5 months, but I'm talking about, it's a game that you almost play with post-its. You're like, okay, this card's value is this card's value. But like the game designers are making up this system and balancing it, like to have a game that works. So yeah, like we were like, okay, the game works on paper. Now they start to build everything on a real digital platform, on an engine. So it was about, like I want to say 4 to 6 months to have a real playable very raw first pass of the game.
Got it. And the reason I'm curious about this is because we talked a little bit before recording, like what I really want to understand the business model here, because myself and I'm sure a lot of people watching this, saw various NFT projects, launch, grow really big, get a lot of users, a lot of sales, and then just disappear. And I think those are probably like mostly people that just bit off more than they could chew. I met people that were doing NFTs, in 2021, 2022, and they were trying to do what Parallel's doing. Oh, we've got these NFTs, but really you're going to be able to play a game with them. And that's really what this is all about. And I think most of them underestimated how hard it is to make a game. Parallel, from what I can tell, and I haven't played it, but it's much simpler than, say, if you were trying to build like an RPG that has multiple online players and all of that. It's Magic the Gathering, essentially. It's like a card game, which is hard enough. And so I'm curious if this was a deliberate strategy. Let's sell the NFTs, explain what we're trying to do, and this becomes a way of funding this startup we're going to do. Is that kind of how you looked at it?
You nailed it. And that was almost the wording. It was like, hey, we have this idea. We're just a group of people trying to do this, but no one's, we're not a Ubisoft or EA or Active. We don't have like
Right.
nothing to
You don't have
do
billions of
this.
dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like if you want to see this game, it's like if you want to see it, here's how we can make it happen. Let's be clear. It's like like we need this amount, and then we'll go from there. We talked about a first person shooter, and I was like, that's not having worked on games before,
Right.
on first person shooters. I was like, that's not realistic. That's just gonna need
It's an enormous amount of work. Yeah.
funds and people and level designers. I was like, okay, so that's why it was created as a TCG, and also because the game designers are truly TCG fans. They've had this idea for years, but when it's like, when you're a kid and you have that fantasy of, well, yeah, I'll make a game. So like, if I made a game, I'll do it this way. So yeah, that those two things influence the decision for sure.
So this is awesome. So I want to jump ahead a little bit because this is where I get confused. So what you just described is an awesome idea, right? Like you've got this game you want to make, and you have all this capability of making artwork, and you've got these designers, and it's going to be beautiful. And because it's electronic, right? It's on a computer, you can have animations too, which is really, really cool. That's the advantage over like Magic the Gathering, the traditional cards. But because you've worked in games, even simple games take a ridiculous amount of work, like the simplest game. And so you're like, we need money to be able to like pay ourselves to live for the 6 to 12 months this is going to take to try, right? So you sell the NFTs as a way of building hype, but also funding it. And I think that's really smart. My question is that still possible today? Because you did that at a time when there was, and I think in hindsight, it's clear that like most NFTs were part of a bubble. Maybe not all of them, but like, the Bored Ape Yacht Club, like they've lost so much value because really, in the end, it was about speculation, right? And I'm guessing that a lot of people that bought that, you may disagree, but I'm guessing a lot of people that bought that first round of NFTs from Parallel, they were probably also speculating. They probably liked the idea of the game and wanted it to exist. They also thought, well, but even if it doesn't, this NFT is going to be worth something, I can sell it. And so I'm guessing you guys sold, I could probably look it up on the blockchain if I knew how, but I'm sure it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? It must have been enough money to pay the salaries for a while. Could you do that now? Would it work if you tried to do it the same way now, do you think?
I want to, I want to think yes, but now because of leaving aside the speculation side of things,
yeah,
and thinking like now that the open beta is out, I'd like to think yes, but because people want the cards for the game. Since the beginning, we always said we're a game first, and the value that people put on these cards, that's that's the choice. And even if someone being Parallel or any other project, if someone buys a pack of cards for, let's say, $150, and then decides that one of those cards is worth $10,000, puts it in the market, and someone buys it, I mean, do I get it? No, but that's their, like, it's worth, for some reason, it's worth 10K to someone out there. You don't know if it's a flex. You don't know if it's, you don't know what it is, but that's their decision, right? Yeah, there's a lot of, just so you know, there's a lot of things regarding NFTs that I still don't understand. Yeah.
Well, so let me ask you another thing, kind of on the same. So I think that so like the speculation side of NFTs, right? I think a lot of people benefited from that. When that was going on, a lot of artists like made really good money, which is awesome. But it was never sustainable, right? Because eventually people are going to discover, well, actually, there's not really a market that's going to be around forever to spend $100,000 on a monkey JPEG, right? That's going to go away. And so what's left are projects like yours where there's an actual thing, there's an actual valuable thing underneath it, right? And so, I definitely see Parallel as a totally different animal, right? It's a game company, and it's using NFTs in this nifty way. But correct me if I'm wrong, because I watched a YouTube video of someone explaining how to play. because I haven't played and I wanted to know. And this guy was explaining it's like Magic. You have to buy a deck of cards, right? And you can have as many as you want, but you usually start with like, let's say 20. He recommended you get 40 cards. Anyway, the reason he was explaining all this was because, like a lot of other NFT projects, as you play this game, you can earn some sort of in-game currency, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And that currency is a crypto coin that can be turned into dollars, right?
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it can be turned into dollars, or it can be used in the game to buy battle passes, cosmetics, in-game purchases. So that's one of the functions of the NFT aspect of it. There's also, you can get what we call apparition packs. They're free cards, but they don't. It's like any other game. You play, you have fun, you win or lost the game match, nothing happened. You just had fun for 15 minutes. But if you bought a pack of NFTs, then if you win, you can actually earn like XP or Prime. That way you can use it for something in real life or something or like if you want a skin or a new emote for your character that you can like show on the board, like, look, I have this, or a card back. Card backs are something that I also learned are a way to show, hey, look at all your cards literally from the back. They have the parallel logo. Mine has this specific artwork that is very limited. So it's for people to be like, oh, this guy,
it's a flex,
this player.
Yeah,
it's a flex.
Yeah, got it.
So that's why, that's one of the uses. The other usability, we have an avatar collection, which is, we have characters from all the 5 factions. And though, like, we're looking at the possibility. I can send you a link later to the video of how they can be used in Colony, which is another game where you can have actually your character walking around. If your avatar has a certain weapon or certain equipment that others don't, like you're playing with yours. So if you like other specific avatar, you can buy it or you can sell yours. And so there's that ownership. I have this. This is in early works, but a guy from the team and I were talking about, hey, if all this is happening in our Unreal Engine, if we make a trailer or a cinematic, is there a way that if you own an avatar, that's the main character of the cinematic? So it changes depending of, my wallet is connected, I own this character, that character will be the hero of the trailer. It sounds cool. I'm don't quote like we're trying stuff, but we're just trying to make cool stuff here.
Yeah. Well, so that sounds awesome, right? And I think as I've kind of thought over the years, okay, what's the best way to use NFTs in this neat way, right? Because it is a cool technology, and there's a lot of, I think really good use cases that have nothing to do with art that make sense. But what you just described is really cool, because now you've got this digital one of one that you can now plug into. NFTs are a much more universal sort of format than, like some proprietary thing that EA Sports uses or something like that, right? So you can plug it in different games. This all sounds great. The biggest question I had for you, and I sent you the questions and we talked a little bit beforehand, is like, this all sounds so cool. How does it make money? How does it sustain? And the reason I asked you about earning in-game currency, and I've told this story in the podcast before, but the one sort of NFT thing that I really got into was this running app called Steppin'.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Because I'm a runner. My friend Joe Donaldson's a runner. So I found this app and I'm like, well, let me try it, right? And so I bought a shoe, an NFT, I don't know, $1,000 or something like that. It wasn't cheap. And then you start running with this app and it tracks your runs. And if you stay above a certain pace for a certain amount of time, you earn cryptocurrency. They had their own currency. And then you could get on Coinbase and you could turn it into dollars and have money, right? But then you got to buy more NFTs to earn more money. By the end of this, I was getting $100 to go outside and run, right? It was crazy. And at that point, I started to go, I don't understand the math of this. How is this possible? Like, where is the $100 I just got? Where's that coming from, right? Who's paying me that? And I asked, they had a Discord, right? Like every NFT project has one, and I would ask, and you'd get like kind of shamed for asking that question. And eventually I just thought, well, I'm assuming whoever's buying the NFT after me, I'm getting some of that money. That's basically what's happening. And that's kind of a pyramid scheme, right? Or a Ponzi scheme. It's unsustainable, whatever you call it. And so I think that's fairly or unfairly kind of colored a lot of the way I look at these NFT projects, because so many of them that were games, that is kind of what they were. They were able to attract really large audiences and a lot of players, because you can actually earn money playing them, which is awesome, and it makes it even more fun to play. But then where does that money come from? It has to come from somewhere. And if you're not paying like a subscription fee to play, you're just buying NFTs. So I guess I'd love to, and I know that you've got business partners that are much more on the business end than you, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about just what is the business model for this? Like how does Parallel make money? And then how does that money go to the players that are getting crypto for it?
Yeah. That's an area I definitely don't dominate, but I'll try to explain like in simple terms.
Before you hear that answer, I want to make sure you know about our in-depth motion design curriculum at School of Motion. We don't just offer classes that you can take anytime, we also offer interactive, guided sessions that go deep into teaching you how to use design and animation software, but more importantly, the principles of good design, animation, illustration, 3D, and much more. You get to learn alongside other artists, and you even get feedback and support from your own personal teaching assistant, a professional motion designer who's part of the School of Motion community. Find out more on our site. The link is in the description.
To the question of how does Parallel make money, by selling cards, by selling in-game items. We have a comic that's for sale. We have drops every certain amount of months. Sales, Now, in my basic understanding, is like if we keep growing our player base and keep selling items, keep making, we're gonna keep making expansions. The expansions give you different cards. They progress with the lore. That should keep the studio going. But like any business, you start with a budget, you create the best thing you can with that, and hope that people respond well to it. If they don't, then sadly that's that. You have a runway. And when it ends, it ends. It's a matter of, being smart, trying to see what's coming. If you see if you see something that's not working, it's like, hey, okay, this is not working. What can we do to make it work, make it better? So that's how the money is made. As for how the token and the funds get to players, I really that's something that I cannot talk about, just because I don't want to butcher it, and I don't want to disturb it to the team or to the audience and to Parallel. So yeah, I will need someone else for that. But I mean, the same. We have a Discord. Our most of the team is always on Twitter. So yeah, we try to be as open as possible. We one of the main differences by building this in the open is that people suggest things to you as like, hey, at game that you should do this, or the lore should go this way, or that. Sometimes it's good. Some people have started to write fan fiction and things like that. But when you're working on a normal game studio, it's like 5 years until you put it out, and then you see what people think about it. So building in the open has that brings those good and bad things at the same time.
Yeah. So you mentioned the word runway, which is interesting. And for everyone watching, I'll just explain this briefly, because I find actually a lot of people don't understand the difference between sort of like your average business, like a pizza place or something like that, and a startup that has to worry about runway. You guys raised back in 2021, you raised $50 million from some investors for this. And most companies that do that raise that money because they're not profitable. They're losing money, and they need lots and lots of cash to be able to lose money long enough to figure out how to make money, right? Like famously, like Facebook's a good example where, now Facebook just prints money. But when it was started, they were making $0, right? They didn't have an advertising platform, anything like that. And they had investors just giving them lots and lots of money to figure it out. Now it's a little different with you guys because you actually you're making NFTs, you're minting them, you're selling them, people buy them. I assume Parallel is also getting something from secondary sales. Is that true?
Percent, yeah, some percentage, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you get some from that, but it seems like unless you figure out some other newer sort of way of you launch another product or something like that, the revenue comes from mostly making new NFTs that are avatars or they're different cards or other things like that. You said there's also a comic. And it sounds like you trying to take this IP and do other things with it, right? Is it fair to say though that you've obviously made money, and I'm sure there's like a lot of cash in the bank because of the investment. Plus, you've sold NFTs and sold millions of dollars worth. You can go on the blockchain and you can look. You guys have done really well, but in the long term, you have to bring in more than you spend. And just knowing how expensive good designers are and engineers and all that kind of stuff. You may not know the answer to this, but I'm curious, like, is Parallel currently profitable? Is there a plan? Is there a roadmap? The thing I worry about is just that it's really hard to make something like this profitable, especially when you're paying your players a certain percentage of it. And the step-in experience I had, it kind of tainted the way I look at this stuff because it was so much fun to go on a run and get paid. But that one detail turned it into something that it cannot last forever unless they switch their business model and start having sponsors or advertisers or something like that, where they can now have recurring revenue you can plan on versus we're running out of money, let's make another NFT. We're running out of money, let's make another NFT. And eventually when you do that, it's going to have this deflationary effect. When you have 10 NFTs and everybody wants them, they're worth more than when you've printed 10,000. And, so anyway, so maybe you could talk a little bit about that as much as you're comfortable with or no. How does Parallel become something that can last for a really, really long time and not have to rely on the runway that you got in the early days?
For now, it's, like I said before, probably like really getting the TCG out there, getting people to play. Also, that it's even just personally, that for me is just one portion of the IP. I love to see this, I love to, in a few years, go to the movie theaters and there's a parallel movie poster on the wall, or you turn your subscription program into like a streaming service and there's a limited series for parallel. That's where I see it going. That's what I would like for it to happen, and not just me. Like, that's the idea that we have, like, to expand, to take this IP as far as we can. To do that, you're not wrong. You need money. So, like that's where we're at, right? We're building, and we just releasing like 3 weeks ago, like or a month ago, the open beta, and see where things go. Again, I take it back to the simple business idea. If people like it, you'll be there forever. If not, the reality is you're not. But you tried, and that's that. And for more I'm for more detailed business savvy answers, I'm just definitely not the person to talk about that. It's just not my day to day and not the area that I dominate. But on the basics is that we get the same. Hopefully, people like it a lot enough that it just keeps going. Like Ninja Turtles started with a comic, then it turned into they gave them money to make prints of that comic, expecting for it to work out. They made a comic, people loved it. Then the cartoons came, the toys came, then the cartoon came to sell the toys. So is that right? Like that's my from my point of view. That's what I'm expecting to happen.
Yeah, I like that though, because I think that's actually like a concrete strategy, right? To make something that becomes profitable. And the profits are not there just so that, all of the co-founders and your investors get money. It's so that the thing can live, like, because if you don't have profits, the thing dies.
The easiest way to kill something that you love is by being greedy.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah.
I've said, you love that thing, be smart about how to grow it, get the right people, recognize what you can and you cannot do, get the people that can do what you cannot do.
Yeah.
And try to make the best of it. I'm repeating myself, but if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's just the reality of like anything you create from scratch, right?
I went to, so I live in Florida and there's a grocery chain here called Publix. And I went in there the other day and I saw they had this cider, like a hard cider brand with Bored Ape pictures on it. And so I think that they're now, a lot of these projects are starting to license the artwork to different things just to try it, like to see if that's another avenue to monetize this stuff. Are there any examples you've seen or other companies that you look at and you're like, they're doing it right, that's kind of where we're aiming?
Not that we're aiming to do the same, because I think like the way we try to future-proof the game and the IP is to think where things are gonna be and do like act on it, right? Like do something to see like, like that's where the trend is not the best word to use, but that's where the fun is going to be, or the good use of this technology, or of this way to open packs or your comics or whatever. But I think, Shrapnel is doing a good job from what I've seen. They're an experienced team. They're open about their building, again, they show how their world is just gray blocks at the moment, but they're showing you like, hey, we're doing what we said we were going to do. The process is ugly, but here, take a peek. I think that's the only project I can think of. But Ben Morrow is doing cool things with Huxley. I remember hearing there was going to be like a film in development or something. That's all the information that was out there. But if it happens, I mean, that's great. And if NFTs help that project to be a reality and people got those NFTs knowing that was the goal, that's cool. If someone bought it thinking, I'm gonna buy this so I can flip it and make tons of money, if it happened, I guess good for them. But I don't think that was not the goal. It was the goal of, hey, I'm building this project. Here's how I can make it happen. You can help me. Again, if we reach this goal, it'll help. We can fund it. If we don't, then enjoy what you bought. Thank you very much for your support, and that's that. Like, move on to the next thing. Yeah. But yeah, you said something else before of reacting to if someone's not making money now, let's do this and let's do that. We truly don't work that way. We know what we want to build and adapt, but not make stuff up just to see if that makes money. We cannot. There's no reason of why to kid yourself.
Well, so you're building. I mean, you guys are building. You're building a lot of things, but the primary thing is a game. And one sort of way of looking at different projects that involve NFTs and evaluating, okay, does this feel real, or does this feel like wishful thinking, which I think a lot of those projects were, is to just ask the question, could this work without NFTs? Like, if NFTs didn't exist and so you had to use some other technology to do this, would people actually buy it? And I think if you look at a lot of the NFT projects, profile pictures and stuff like that, would people have spent tens of thousands of dollars on those if they were not NFTs? It was just Twitter charging a fee to customize your thing? No, probably not. It probably wouldn't have worked, right? But do people pay money and pay lots of money for games and deck building things where you can invest to have more, and not even just deck building things, but I mean, like my son, has spent half his allowance on like Fortnite skins and stuff like that, which are not NFTs, but it's like, it's a digital good that provides value, provides some meaning to him. And it seems like Parallel could work just fine without NFTs. Do you agree? Like, are NFTs integral to it, or is it just that's the technology you're using?
Yeah, I think it would work. And like you said, it's the technology we're using, and that it was something that made sense at the time when we started. But granted, like without that, I think it will work now. But without it's weird because without the NFTs, we wouldn't be able to start this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we can talk about NFTs outside of parallel to our opinions, but yeah, I'd say right now it would work. Before, I have to recognize without that, we wouldn't be able to have the means to build it. Or get there's some people interested in the technology. They're like, oh, I like this new thing and I want to try it. And then they're like, I actually like the game. I find that a lot of people that haven't tried the game focus more on the NFT aspect of it. When people start playing the game, that fades because you're thinking you're thinking about the game, you're thinking about your deck, you're not thinking about how much it was or how much can I make. It's just you're just there having fun, which that's a very good sign.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's a very good sign for you guys, because it seems like what you've built is actually something people want. And the fact that the artwork is amazing makes it more fun, and the lore is really good and all of that. But if the game wasn't fun, it wouldn't matter,
No. I mean, that's something that we discussed. Since if what you're building is not fun, it can look amazing.
Yeah.
And that's that.
No one will care. Yeah.
No, you don't care. I mean, there's I was looking at the PlayStation 5 store, and that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game from the 90s that is called Pixels is back. And it's like people are loving it just because it's fun. It's like Frogger. Can I get to the other side of the street? You can have fun for a while. It is what it is. I'm not saying you're going to play that thing for 8 hours, but all right, and you have 20 minutes to kill. You really have fun playing it, and you come back some other thing. So if what you're doing is not fun, it's not going to work.
This is off topic, but Turtles in Time is my favorite arcade game ever. I can't even imagine how many quarters I dumped into that thing. Yeah, so good.
And I think that's the game. I honestly bring that reference. I'm a fan of the Turtles. I just read the Ronin comic. Yeah. Anyway,
that's the one. That's the jam. That's the jam. So okay, so I do want to hear. There's two more things I want to ask you about. So the first is, what's your, and you kind of referenced it a little bit already. The word NFT, unfortunately, has been tainted by sort of the bubble that we all experience and the bad behavior of some of the companies and artists too during that like meteoric rise. So I think, it probably unfairly colors, and I'll admit that I'm definitely guilty of this. Like, it unfairly colors things that are perfectly like normal businesses. Like, let's start a company that makes a game. That's what you guys have done. You're using NFTs as a technology so that users can store their cards and trade them and sell them, and it makes that marketplace, kind of more universal and easier to implement. But I'm sure that a lot of people, when they hear that you're involved in something that has the word NFT in it, it probably, they maybe pinch their nose a little bit. So I'm curious how the public perception of NFTs has impacted, Parallel, but also, like you mentioned before we started recording that you tried selling your own NFTs a few years ago, and it didn't go so well. So maybe just talk a little bit about what your perception of NFTs and how the general perceptions kind of impacted you.
So starting with talking about Parallel, I'll start with that part. We like to say we're a game for everyone. It's okay if we're not for you. That's simple, right? Like if that aspect bothers you enough to not try the game, that's your decision, and I guess that's fine. In the beginning, people were without knowing anything, they're like, oh, that's a scam. That's not real. There's no game. There's no blah blah blah. Which at first it kind of stung because you're building a game, but like I said, it takes a certain time to be able to show something. So you're behind your monitor, pulling your face of like, I swear we're building something. We cannot just show you post-it papers because it just doesn't make sense. So it's a matter of being okay. I have to go with that, and I guess wait until we have something to show. Once they saw that the product was real and that the game was there, you like you could actually play it. There's nothing weird about it. They're like, okay, a lot of naysayers either started to enjoy it, others ignores it, and they're like, okay, I cannot talk shit about that anymore, so I'll focus on something else. So it definitely had impact also in the personal, like not personal, but when I had social media, like people will leave a nasty comment and unfollow you, and like same to like some of the designers and artists on the team, which is the part that hurt is that it was people that you really admire, and you're like, man, like that sucks. Like I mean, I'm still gonna love your work. It's just I'm not the kind of person who like takes a pitchfork and yell about something that I that and yell to someone about something just because I don't agree with that person. It was the same with that, right? It's like it's kind of a shame that you're putting me with everyone else. If we could only have a conversation face to face, you would
Yeah.
know that I feel the same as you about whatever, like the ones that you don't like. I also don't get them, and probably agree with you in a lot of things. But just because you already saw those three letters,
Yeah.
you made me a part of that. That kind of, that
Yeah.
hurts.
I get it.
But that's that.
I guess the last thing I wanted to ask you about, Oscar, was, is there, because what you've been able to do, and the other artists on your team and everything, you've been able to take your skill set of making like these really cool concepts, and then using Cinema 4D and I'm sure other apps, and making these beautiful renders, and they're animated and they're so cool, and then you get to think up the story and how it all ties together. I mean, that's like a dream job, right? And the way that you launched it was by using NFTs. NFTs as a technology, it makes a lot of sense for a card game. It actually, like, I think digital collectibles is like the use case that is the most clear. Like, that makes sense to me for NFTs. And so is there something, however, the what's it called? The floor price, right? For NFTs, it's just gotten so much lower. Like, it's just not what it was. And I suspect if you tried, hey, let's see if we can go out and raise $500,000 for this game we want to make, and we'll make 50 NFTs and we'll try to sell them for 10 grand a piece, and that's how we're going to fund this. I don't think it would work now, right? So is there something, a lot of what happened to you guys had just was luck, just doing it at the right time, doing it early enough where you still could get that kind of money. Since then, you use that as a launch pad to build something real, which is really awesome. But do you think that someone watching this who's like, man, Oscar has my dream job, I want to do something like that, can I do it the way Oscar did it? Or if you had to like start a game company doing what you're doing now, how would you raise money now? Like, what is there something that someone listening to this or watching it can take away from what you did? Can they use that playbook now, or has the playbook changed?
It will probably have to be funded by an investor, showing that investor why you think it will work, and getting them to believe in you and say like, hey, okay, and same way producers invested in a movie, like, okay, I like it, I hope it does well. I think it will have to be done that way. But maybe someone can think of ways of using this technology in a way that we haven't thought of, and it's like, oh, this is even more innovative now, and people, you know, believe in it and fund it. If you can get people excited enough about something, I think it can be done. But definitely nowadays it will be easier to get it funded by someone else.
The old-fashioned way.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way. Yeah, I mean it's the reality that I see. I'm not the most savvy on tech and business, so I might be wrong, but that's the way I perceive it. Yeah.
Do you think that you've talked about like IP a lot, right? Because that's, you know, right now you have all this IP and you're using it for a game, but you're also using it for a comic. And you've talked about some other things you'd like to see the parallel IP used for. And I think that is sort of like the holy grail for a lot of, especially motion designers, because we can design and animate. So you could create basically all by yourself, really cool IP, and then it'd be nice to find a way to license it or use it. Do you think that, like during the NFT bubble, I think what a lot of people got excited about was it seems like now this is possible for motion designers. We can now create IP and make money from the IP as opposed to having clients pay us to make their IP. Do you still see that as like a viable way for motion designers to make a living and have a career? Or like, was there kind of this magic window of 3 or 4 years where it was possible and now that door's kind of closed down, it's much harder again?
It's definitely a bit harder again, but I think it showed that it's possible. My recommendation will be to, if you see that the chance is there, don't do it alone. If you know that you're missing a certain personality or element, I wouldn't be able, like Parallel wouldn't be what it is without the rest of the co-founders. We each have a discipline. We each understand our discipline really well, but don't really, like if you ask our CEO, how's the cinematic made? He's gonna tell you, well, they make concepts, then there's a 3D model, and then there's a final render, and that's fine. That's what he should know, right? Like that's it's not his. It shouldn't be his concern. It's my concern on like, okay, how do we make this happen in the best way possible? So I think that will be my recommendation. But it is possible, and I've seen it before. You know, I have 2 examples. I made a vinyl figure, a toy, years ago, like this guy, right?
Oh, that's rad, dude.
And it was completely. It's like I mean, I really wanted to have like a vinyl toy.
Yeah.
From like from a personal design. So it was funded by someone who owned a vinyl toy store in Toronto. I showed it the place called and everything. Is like, all right, let me put money in it. It's the same thing. Let me put money on this, go to manufacturing, and see what happens. At first, it just seemed like a pit of money. Like, okay, we have to put money for the mold and this and that. And I was feeling bad. I'm like, dude, as someone, I was just receiving I was basically just emptying his wallet, and he's like, let's see what happens. It came out. He started to sell them. I got my part. I had a friend help me design the guy. He helped with the sculpt. So we got our pieces, and the guy, everything ended up good. So that came up. I put it in social media. Someone from Cartoon Network reached out, and they're like, hey, like, what's that? Like, this seems like there's a cool, there's something there. What's the story? And I was like, oh, he has like a stake on his side. That's always like, he's always starting fights and whatnot. And he's like, okay, so what's the story of the steak? And I'm like, oh, this guy made the most the most spicy hot sauce ever made, marinated the steak there for a night. And when he came back the next morning, the steak was alive and yelling profanities, and he runs like his veins are full of
that's amazing.
hot sauce. And they're like, okay, so yeah, like, let's see what we can do. I didn't have the skills to take it further. Went nowhere. That's one story. I released a short film called Speed Animals. It's like a 1-minute piece of these guys getting ready to race. I heard through the line, like, oh, this studio is like looking at that short, and they have it as references on their boards. And I was like, oh, like, okay, that's cool. I got reached out, and that was like by someone there. And I was like, oh, I'm not like asking if I wanted to work on it, but I was like, no, like, this is my thing, like, that's my piece, that's it. And years later, a game came out, and it has the exact, it's 2D characters with the same rendering style of the cars, and it was by that company. So I was like, well, maybe that was a opportunity. But so if you know how to take things further, it's definitely still possible. It's not easy. I mean, I couldn't do it alone, but I know that's mainly because of the traits I lack. So if you know that, search for people that have those traits, and it's probably gonna happen.
Head to parallel.life to learn more about the game and to check out the stunning work that Oscar and his team have been pumping out. And then leave a comment or tag us on social media at schoolofmotion.com and let me know if this episode made you feel any differently about NFTs. I have to admit that talking with Oscar made me feel a lot more comfortable with how NFTs are being used in Parallel's case. And maybe, just maybe, there's a future for NFTs in the world of design and animation after all. Let me know what you think, and I'll catch you next time.